Well, welcome. Thanks everybody for joining us. This is the second installment of the Student Career Development Series, a NGPA conference aimed at connecting students and industry professionals. So we're really glad that everybody is here. And just some quick housekeeping things. Just try to mute your microphone if you're not sharing anything, just to keep the noise level down. And if you are able, just add your pronouns to your name description. That'll help everybody be respectful of those. And we'll get moving here. Once my screen works. Okay, perfect. So this is a quick overview of the agenda today. We're going to have 3 speakers. We'll talk a little bit more about each of our wonderful speakers in a second here. We'll go into a quick little break transition as we move into a breakout rooms. There'll be 3 different breakout rooms, and you'll be able to move freely between those. Then soon after that, we will hear from Angie Marshall with Cage Marshall Consulting, and she has a lot of great tips and feedback for anybody who is, starting to pursue a career in aviation, and some things that would be valuable to help your career search. And then after that, we'll just do a quick regroup and conclusion, and we'll send everybody on their way. I'll start off by introducing our moderator today, Mr. Martin Rotler. He's a graduate of University of North Dakota. He's also spent some time as a professor at The Ohio State University and was my previous faculty advisor for our NGPA chapter here at Ohio State. He's also the director of the NGPA Governance Committee and founder of the P56 Aviation Group, amongst many other aviation specialties, including recruiting manager for a major U.S. airline and lots of other amazing things. So Martin has a wealth of knowledge and really great person to have to host our event today. So with that, I will hand it off to you, Martin.
Thank you, Dylan, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to be joining yet again another career development series and another set of really incredible guests with some really wonderful stories to tell. Once again, I am Martin Rotler. I am a professional aviation geek. Regardless of the role that I have or the job that I have and the title, my real life is professional aviation geek. And I'm really honored to be here. I'm honored to be asked to sit down with our fantastic guests, Danny, Jan, and Karl today, to chat a little bit more about their experience and what they bring and what they've brought to the industry, and have made some incredible strides with what they've done. So students, you have today an incredible opportunity to learn more from some incredible leaders in the aviation industry. Each and every one of them has blazed their own unique and special trail through good times and difficult times to find success. So with that, I hope you take away a lot of great information. I hope you enjoy the breakout sessions later. I also hope that you enjoy the session with Cage Marshall after this as well. I know Angie Marshall is here and looking forward to sharing insights with you, particularly now, if you've paid attention to any of the news that hiring is picking up with the airlines. It is, so now is the time to learn so that you're prepared when it's your time to jump. So first and foremost, I would like to, on behalf of NGPA, introduce our first guest today, Danielle Jackson. Danny is a first officer with NetJets flying the Citation Latitude. She got her start in aviation in high school, earning her private pilot's license during her senior year before continuing on to Rocky Mountain College in Billings, Montana to finish her ratings and earn her bachelor's degree in aeronautical science. Her flying career so far has included flying charter in various King Airs, followed by many years of air ambulance work in Billings, Montana, in a King Air 200, before finally achieving her dream of a job at NetJets in 2018. She currently lives in Billings, Montana, but will be moving to Seattle, Washington in the near future. Danny, on behalf of NGPA, once again, welcome to the Student Career Development Conference Series. Since you're our first speaker at our second conference, I'll lead off with a little bit more background about what we're going to do this afternoon before I start asking you a few of the questions. As I just said, I will be asking a bunch of questions for each one of our speakers, including Danny, After each one of our three speakers today, we'll then go into breakout rooms where you, student participants, will have the opportunity to ask your own questions and learn more about each speaker. More specifics about the breakout room will be provided by Dylan after Karl Johnson speaks in a little while. So I hope you have the opportunity to do this. But once again, Danny, welcome to the Student Career Development Series. So first and foremost, welcome. Can you share a little bit? Can you share a little bit about yourself and your current role and what steps led you to what you're doing today?
Like I said, I'm a first officer at NetJets. I fly the Citation Latitude, which is, mid-size business jet, kind of similar to the Sovereign. Our operation is all sort of on call, so it's unscheduled operations, which leads to a lot of really great variety in my job. We don't drive the bus back and forth. We're going into all sorts of little different airports all the time. Every day is different. I got here after a couple of different interview processes with NetJets, so it took a little bit of effort to get on, but it's been worth the journey. And I think I'm going to be a long hauler here at NetJets.
That's fantastic. You've had some really interesting experience in the air ambulance world, in the charter world, and now at NetJets. Which is pretty different from what a lot of people are used to in the airline industry. And there may be some other differences. But one of the things I think that really comes into play with all pilot positions in particular is the idea of professionalism. So in the business aviation field, which you've spent the majority of your career in, what does professionalism look like to you?
Well, from my perspective at NetJets, and especially in the Citation Latitude, we are an unattended fleet, so we do not carry a flight attendant on our fleet. So professionalism at my current role includes a lot of face-to-face interaction with our owners, with our passengers. We load them, we load the bags, we give the briefings, we help them with catering. The pilots are the face of the customer's interaction with the company. So we are just always in the spotlight of being held to a really high level of professionalism, just because the owners only really ever see their salesperson and then the pilots. So we're cognizant of the way that we speak, the way that we hold ourselves, making sure that our uniforms and our presentation is all very pressed and professional looking. And then just all of our, I don't know what's the word. We are also still face-to-face even when we're flying, because we don't have cockpit doors on our airplane, so the owners can see all the way up into the cockpit. So just keeping a professional vibe, even when we're up front flying the airplane, and being mindful that we're kind of in the spotlight all the time. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know, once again, you've had some really cool career experiences as well. What career experiences have you had that most surprised you with what you're doing or what you've done up to this point?
I think what just continues to surprise me is the level of acceptance that I've experienced once I've gotten up into a really professional role, regardless of my gender, my queer identity, anything. I've just always seemed to have been blown away more times than not by the fact that I'm just viewed as an equal and a peer amongst my coworkers. I'll get into an airplane with somebody that I've never flown with before, and they just have no doubt that I'm just as qualified as they are, that I'm just as able as they are. And I think that that's really incredible.
That's really awesome. That's good to hear. I know we have another question about that coming up, so we'll circle back to that in a little bit. But one thing, if you could go back in time and tell your collegiate, your younger self, something, what about, particularly now that you're sitting at this place as a first officer for NetJets, what could you go back in time and tell yourself back in the day? Is there anything that you could go back and say, or that you would go back and say?
I do think that something important to focus on when I was younger is that flight training is not what your professional career is going to look like. I know I was talking to Dylan about this the other day. I experienced some burnout when I was going through my commercial license. It's a lot of hours spent doing maneuvers, a lot of hours doing cross countries and ground school and all that stuff. It does get better once you're actually in a professional role and doing this as your job. The monotony gets out of the equation a little bit. But I also think that just taking a step back and focusing on enjoying the stage that you're at currently, I think that that's really important too. So even if you are struggling in school or just, experiencing some burnout from long days of flight lesson after flight lesson, to remember that you're not going to be in this stage forever. So to find some benefits in the stage that you're always at and make sure that you're focusing on some of those positives, because the next stage is going to look completely different and you're never going to go back to where you were before. And there's great things about every step of the way.
And as I'm sure you found, each new stage has its own positives and its own negatives, right? I think that's a key thing that I've always realized in my career spots. And I'm sure that you probably have realized it in your different roles too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. One of the things I said we'd circle back. One of the things you talked about was acceptance of your queer identity in the aviation industry. How has your identity shaped the lens that you view the aviation industry? Has it altered it? Is it a normal thing, or is there anything that you feel you bring to the industry, or that just sticks out to you in mind?
I definitely am out at work, and that has, for me, never really been an issue. It's just sort of a known thing. I like the idea of being out and proud at work, just because the queer community in aviation is so small, and in particular, female identifying pilots in the queer community, in the aviation community. It's a very, very small group. So I rock my NGPA pin on my flight tote. I've got a Pride Women in Aviation sticker on the back of my luggage works bag. And I have personally, I have not experienced any sort of pushback about it. I've never had anybody have anything but acceptance to say about it. If they have had negative ideas, then they've been kept to themselves. So I have been very fortunate in that way. And I don't know, I guess that I don't know a different way to view the aviation industry than through my lens. So I don't really have anything to compare that to.
Cool. That's great to hear. It's good to hear that the path has been smooth for you thus far.
Thus far, yes, thankfully.
That's great. Yeah. So the next question I have is a two-parter. So I'll ask the first part first, and then I'll ask the second part second. So obviously, throughout our journeys through the aviation industry, we have people that help us along the way, that are mentors and that help mentor us and provide guidance. So how have mentors aided you along the way?
Well, that bit that I mentioned earlier about just enjoying the step that you're at, that was definitely from one of my favorite pilots, a gentleman that was the chief pilot when I first started flying King Airs here in Montana. And I think the way that he had mentioned it was that, everybody is always looking for that next step. So you're in the 172 and you're looking to get, your MEI and start instructing multi-engine, and then you get that and you want to get into a charter, and then you want to get into a twin engine, and then something bigger, and the eyes are always set further down the line. And so taking a step back and appreciating where you're at right now has really been impactful for me. And then just all the, my mentors have just really given me some great opportunities. I graduated college in 2007, right into the recession, and there was no jobs to be had. And I was fortunate enough to be working multiple jobs at an FBO in Billings. And I was given the chance from one of my first mentors, Ron Walterman, to let me sit right seated in the King Airs. And just the opportunities that I've been given since then for learning King Airs in mountain environments, flying into short strips. My ambulance experience with on-call at night in weather, flying into those same mountain strips has just been a really great opportunity. That's all been can all be traced back to that first ability, opportunity with my first mentor there.
That's awesome. And you actually answered the second part of the question, which is some of the most beneficial advice you've received. So there you go. You shared it. Always take time to appreciate the current situation so that you're ready for the next one. That's a great piece of advice for everyone, and particularly for the students that are doing flight training. Well, the last question I have for you, and I said this time really does fly by as we talk to one another. The final question is, what makes you excited for the future of your segment of aviation?
Well, NetJets just announced a couple of weeks ago that we're in the market for buying an Aviation supersonic jet, and I think that is wicked cool. I'm really looking forward to being able to get into something really neat like that. But my section of aviation, general aviation, has just been so rewarding to me with the variety that I get to experience. For instance, last week, I think I spent a night in Austin, Texas, a night in St. Martin, a night in Nassau, and then I think we were over to someplace in North Carolina and then ended in like Kansas City or something. So you don't get that sort of flying with the airlines, and it leads to just being excited to go to work every single week.
Yeah, that is awesome.
And business aviation is not going anywhere. People need to fly on demand, in ways that the airlines might not be able to offer, or timelines that the airlines might not be able to offer. So business aviation is really a great, stable industry that just continues to amaze me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more about your experience with us today. For the students that are here, if you want to, obviously Danny will be staying in one of our breakout session rooms so that you're able to answer any more questions that you might have. And all of the speaker contact information will be shared. Their emails will be shared at the end of our session today. So keep an eye out there. But once again, Danny, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your awesome experience, your awesome insights about the industry, and look forward to seeing you. And hopefully one day I'll be able to hit you up for a ride on one of those supersonic aircraft, because otherwise I don't think I'll be able to afford a NetJets plane.
I don't think I will be either.
Just have a friends and family flight. How's that going?
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. Cool. Well, Danny, thank you again. We'll see you in the breakout room here shortly.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, students, our second speaker today is, I'm proud to say, NGPA royalty. While she may not be a queen, she's certainly among one of the best representatives that the organization has ever had, who has given of significant time and significant effort selflessly for many years. And so it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome and introduce Captain Jan Anderson up to the virtual stage for our conversation today. Captain Jan has been a longtime member of the NGPA, joining in 1998. In that time, she's held volunteer positions as chair of the Women's Committee for 5 years, and has also served as the NGPA Selection Committee, on the NGPA Selection Committee for over 10 years. And most recently, Jan served as vice president of the organization alongside President David Pettit. Jan's aviation career began in college at the University of Minnesota, where she completed a bachelor's degree in the Aviation Professional Pilot Program. And after college, she went and flight instructed in St. Paul, Minnesota for several years until she was hired at Mesaba Airlines, which was a regional airline for Northwest, for 2 years until she was hired at American in 1988. Jan has flown many airplanes in her 33-plus year airline career, from turboprops to jets, including the Metro 3, the Fokker F-27, the Boeing 727 MD-80, Boeing 737, 757, 767, and is now a captain on the Boeing 777 based out of Dallas, Texas. Jan has also served on the American pilot recruitment team since 1998 and is responsible for helping interview prospective pilot candidates. She is especially excited about American's recent announcement that they will be hiring and recalling all of their pilots and beginning pilot hiring again this year. We'll be back to the interview minds for you, Jan, right?
Yeah.
Jan is currently phoning in and lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota with her wife of 34 years, Core Great, where they enjoy spending time with family and friends at their cabin on a lake. They have many hobbies, some of which are water skiing, although not in February, probably in Minnesota, no. Golfing, horseback riding, just to name a few. Jan, welcome to the Student Career Development Series. Happy to have you join us today.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for your kind thoughts. You're too kind.
So obviously, I talked a little bit more about your kind of path through the industry and your biography, but can you talk a little bit more about how you found yourself in your current role and what steps led you to where you're at today?
Well, like my career has expanded over 30 years, and as you know, the world has changed, and especially aviation has changed so much in that time. From the point where when I was hired and when I was interviewing just out of college, trying to get a job at a regional carrier or even at American in '88, you couldn't be open or honest about who you were and that you were LGBT, because you could legally be fired or not hired because of that. And that was always really, really painful and really an awful place to be for the entire community, because we were all in the closet. But thank God NGPA popped up, because all of a sudden it was somebody said, hey, did you know there's a group of gay pilots? And we all get together, and there's Air Force, there's military, there's civilian, there's all these people, and men and women, and we can get together and we can talk about our lives and ourselves. And so I joined the NGPA early on, and through the NGPA's activism and social, change, work for social change, I really, really felt that was incredibly important, that we can build better for the people coming up behind us, not only for my life and my people in my current role at the time as we were moving through our careers, but for everybody coming up behind us. So that's basically how I got involved with the NGPA. And with American and with the airlines, it's pretty generic. You get involved, you get hired by an airline, you get a seniority number, and it's all based on seniority, and everything moves on seniority. And my wife and I are together the whole time. And so we always made a pact that whatever decision I made, whatever base I chose, whatever aircraft I chose, whatever seat I chose, we would make that decision together, because family is very important to us and being happy is very important to me. And if you're miserable in a position because you're stuck on reserve, or you can't come home for 3 weeks because you have to be based in New York where you live in Minneapolis, if you're miserable, your marriage is going to fall apart, your life's going to fall apart, and you're going to be depressed. So I always have commuted my whole life, which is another choice I made. And so in order to do that, I stayed senior in every position that I had. And that has worked out really, really well for me. And now, like I said, through seniority, I've advanced to wide body captain, and it's just an amazing career.
That's great. And I think the idea about family and working with your family to be a part of this, something probably many college students might not be considering right now, but it is especially important for that. And that conversation is probably a very important one to have. So that's a
Right.
great insight to bring up that a lot of people don't necessarily realize, particularly when they're in flight training.
Yeah, my family, when I came out, of course,
Mhm.
my family was very Catholic, and, comes from my parents are 90 years old. They're still alive. I love them to death. But things weren't so smooth when I came out. I was 17 years old when I came out, and it was kind of like, I got kind of like not physically booted out of the house, but I kind of got booted out of the circle for a while. And I didn't go to a lot of events that the family held for probably 5-6 years. And I slowly worked my way in through discussion with my family and got back involved with my family, and my parents and my siblings have been very supportive of me over time. And going through my aviation career, my parents and my siblings have been the biggest allies I could have ever asked for. But it took a lot of work and commitment and communication. is key.
Hmm. That's great to hear, and glad that they're fully on your side.
Well, not so many people aren't so, not everybody's so
Yeah,
lucky. I understand
yeah.
that, but keep
Well,
working at it. It,
keep working at it. Yeah. Well, the next question I have, and this is a great one because you have these great insights both as a pilot, but also as someone who's worked on the pilot hiring side for passenger airline. What does professionalism look like to you and to the greater airline pilot career?
yeah, that's a good one. I think for me, it's finding resumes and reading stories of people, and things that pop out to me are commitment. If somebody's committed to their career and they're patient, they've been patient because this is not this is not something that's going to happen quickly. It's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And doing your due diligence and staying focused. A lot of people, you'll read a resume, and I know life happens. Like this last year, COVID happened, and a lot of people lost their jobs, or they had to take a pause and do things not that they wanted to do.
Hmm.
Um, I even took a year leave of absence because the wide body got parked. But if you take a pause or something happens in your career to throw you something out of left field, and you're wondering what to do, by commitment, I mean stay involved in aviation.
Hmm.
I know that's not always super easy, but a lot of people will spread themselves very thin, and they'll be like, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a 777 captain, just like you. But in the meantime, I have all these other side jobs and careers, and none of them have to do with aviation. And you're kind of like, well, or in the meantime, I sold real estate, or in the meantime, I did this. But I understand people have commitments and they have to raise families, or they have to pay
Hmm.
bills or student loans or whatnot. But whatever you can do to stay committed to aviation, that's one thing. And to
Yeah.
do your diligence and to knock on doors, meet
Hmm.
people, go talk to people, do the homework that's required for the job, and stick with it and be committed in that way. And surround yourself with people that support you and
Hmm.
love you, and that will be there for you to help build you up on that path. And that will reflect in your resume and in your life. And most
Awesome.
importantly, now especially, that it is okay to live as your open, true, authentic self as an
Hmm.
LGBTQI plus member of the community. Do that if you can,
Hmm.
and be proud, because we're not hiding in the closet anymore for fear of being fired. We're being celebrated. And I know for a fact American, United, Delta, all the legacy carriers, and even the regional carriers are looking for minorities, women,
Hmm.
people of color, and people from the NGPA to hire. So celebrate that and don't be ashamed of it.
Awesome. You've had some very extensive career experiences and some really interesting aircraft flown and some really cool opportunities. Was there one that really stuck out in your mind that was just way awesome that you think students would benefit from hearing from?
Yeah, when I became a captain years ago, everybody has to do a briefing, and you get your crew together and you sit and talk to everybody. And I always would just sit and talk to all my flight attendants, and if maintenance was around, I'd invite them to the briefing, and the agents, whoever, my first officer, I'd bring them in and I'd say, hey, we're a team. And yes, I'm the captain, but I need you all to know here that I support you in whatever you're doing, as long as you're doing your job and you're doing it correctly and you're doing it right and in a safe, reliable manner. And if anybody out there treats you disrespectfully, or says something to you, or makes a move towards you that is in any way, shape, or form disrespectful, sexism, racism, all the isms, I said, come to me, because I have your back. I am your person to come to, because I
Hmm.
know American Airlines has my back around all of this, and that will not be tolerated, and we will deal with this because you're important and you matter, and we will make this happen. And everybody just kind of stood there and looked at me like, really? Nobody's ever said that to us before. Nobody's ever, that is so awesome. Thank you so
Hmm.
much for, saying that I matter, and saying
Yeah.
that I'm important to this job and to you, the captain of the airplane, and that the flight attendants matter, or the agents matter, and that I'm not going to tolerate disrespect or discrimination.
Awesome. That's great. That's a
Yeah.
great thing to carry in.
Yeah. And I see it
Um,
more and more all the time. And it's just so amazing how it bonds people together for your
Mhm.
for your crew, and it makes you that much more solid, and so you're even that much more safe.
Absolutely. It's all about communication, particularly
Yep.
with regards to that.
Communication, support, and safety, definitely.
That's great. So I have a question about, you've had mentors and you've had others help you along the way. How have they helped you, and what was the most beneficial piece of advice that you've acted on or received?
Well, a lot of I have to echo, what Danielle said and Danny said earlier about be in the moment where you are, and because your career is a minute, and I'm proof of that. I turned 60 this year, and so I'm in the last 5 years of my career. And I remember when I was a flight instructor or a student pilot in college thinking, oh man, I can't wait till I'm a captain on the 777, and I thought it's so far away, it's like way out there in the future. But here it is, and it was a minute ago. So be in the moment, and so, and definitely I had when I started coming out, one of the first people I came out to was my boss when I was a flight instructor. And he
Mhm.
turned out to be one of the biggest allies I could have ever come out to. And he supported me and loved me and just lifted me up when I would start hitting barriers. So it's
Mm.
definitely important to seek out those people in your life. If you don't have anyone that is a mentor per se, or somebody you can communicate with, seek someone out now, because your mental health and your state of mind is important. And also to care for each other. The
Mhm.
NGPA is an amazing group of people, and when I joined that, I found there were others like me, and we supported each other. So the NGPA almost became a mentor, and the friends I met through the NGPA became my mentors, because we could sit down and talk about our problems, and we could debrief all the literally crap that we went through back then, and we
Mhm.
could get it off our shoulders in a safe environment. So find
Yeah.
people that support you in that way.
And I think that's a great piece of advice. And put in the work to do it too, because it's not just a one-way street of people standing there and giving advice. I mean, there will
No.
be pilots that will do that, but
Oh yeah.
you have to chase. It is an art of a chase to find a mentor and to build that relationship, and it does take work. So that's great advice. Uh, And the last question I have, and you mentioned it earlier, I mentioned it, and it was mentioned in your biography, but American, I know that you're excited that American is recalling pilots and starting pilot hiring again. What else makes you excited for the future of aviation?
What makes me excited for the future of aviation is that all the legacy carriers and regional carriers and freight haulers, UPS, FedEx, and corporate America are hiring, and they will be hiring more and more soon. And they are focusing on our communities. They are focusing on LGBTQ plus or QI plus. They're focusing on women, and they're focusing on minorities of all races and nations. And that is, I mean, I am through the moon on that. And it's,
Mhm.
of course, you're going to see a lot of stuff on Facebook about, oh, the straight white person is out there saying that's reverse discrimination, and da 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 da. It's like, oh, now you know how we felt for all those years, that all the classes were filled with straight white men who walked right out of a military jet. No civilians, no women, no people of color, no God, no LGBT. Because they were not even considered. So the fact that we are being celebrated and minorities are being celebrated is incredibly exciting. And just to highlight American, because I can, because I'm part of their recruitment team, we announced that we're recalling all of our furloughed pilots who were on property. And we also had several hundred that had CJOs, conditional job offers, at the time COVID hit. Those are all still good. We're also bringing all those people on property this summer, any of them that want to come back. And I know that there's a lot of people who
Mhm.
might not come back. They've gone on to other careers, but that's fine. But we're giving them the opportunity to come back. And then in the fall, we're hoping to have everybody back on property by October of this year. And then we're going to hire up to 350 before the end of the year. So we're going to hire 350 people off the street in just 3 months. So that's
That's
pretty
awesome.
big. And then we're
Mhm.
going to double that number in 2022. So we could have upwards of 700 people hired off the street then. And that does include some flow throughs. which is good news if you're with Envoy, PSA, or Piedmont. So it's
Fantastic.
and I would imagine American, United, and Delta each, if they have 10 to 15,000 pilots on property right now, we are all going to physically retire because we're turning 65 in the next 10 years. We're all going to, half of us are going to be gone. So you're looking at 30,000 to 40,000 pilots. Half of those are going to be gone and going to need to be replaced in the next 10 to 15 years. So the hiring is only going to continue. God
So
forbid we have another pandemic.
Yeah.
But I'm
The
just saying,
students that are, yeah.
get busy right now and
Yeah.
you know, get flying and sharpen those pencils and type in those hours on your, you know, on your books, and you know, get your resumes and start writing down what you're going to say. And Cage Marshall's going to talk to people about how to do interviews and use opportunities like this to use a recruiting developer to help you with your interview, because it's well worth the money. It's $500 or whatever it is. It's a huge investment in your career. And we can tell when we interview pilots that that have used a recruiting department to help them, and those that have not. And the ones that have not are not very polished, and the ones that are knock it out of the park, and they always get A+. So
I find it fascinating. And it's true with this, that any of the students, if you're a junior or senior on this session today or watching this recording later, you could be the one to replace Jan in 5 years when she's forced to retire. So
I'll be out at the lake water skiing and hanging out, and you can fly overhead in your 777, and I'll think of you and be happy for you, because it's an amazing. You're gonna love it. Can't wait for you to get here.
Thank you so much, Jan. Give up my seat. Thank you so much, Jan, for joining us today. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, you'll be in a breakout room as well during our breakout session after we're done with Karl, and your NGPA email address will be shared at the end of the session. So once again, thank you for the amazing insights. Thank you for the great work that you do, your continued passion for NGPA, as well as for mentoring and moving forward and enabling that next generation of aviation that's able to move forward, living their authentic selves, thanks in large part to the trailblazing efforts of you and your early peers in the organization. So I can't thank you enough. And you know, once again, thank you so much. So Jan, thank you. Big hug, virtual. Next up, and finally, last but certainly not least, joining the conversation today is Karl Johnson with UPS Airlines and the U.S. Air Force Reserve. Karl currently serves as a first officer on the Boeing 747 for UPS and is a part-time Air Force reservist at the 77th Air Refueling Squadron at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. He currently lives in Durham, North Carolina with his fiancée Marcus and their dog Chelsea. Karl is a native of Boston, Massachusetts, and became interested in aviation when he first got to see his uncle, a former astronaut, fly NASA's T-38 and later the Space Shuttle Discovery. Karl attended Syracuse University, where he majored in mechanical engineering and did the Air Force ROTC program. Upon graduation, Karl attended Air Force pilot training at Vance Air Force Base, where he was selected to fly the C-17. After 12 years of active duty, he transitioned to the Air Force Reserves last fall. Congratulations and thank you for your service. And you will soon be transferring to learn to fly the KC-46. So that'll be a new opportunity and experience. And Karl was able to be hired and got hired by UPS in February of this year. And just literally the ink is still drying on his 747 type rating earlier this week. So congratulations on both of those fantastic achievements, and welcome to the civilian world, I guess would be the best way to say that. Karl has been an NGPA member since 2016. He's currently the co-chair of the NGPA's Advocacy Advisory Council and is also an active member with the NGPA AIDS Lifecycle team. So thank you for your continued volunteer efforts with the organization as well. And welcome to the Career Development Conference Series. Thanks for joining us, Karl.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And then Danny and Jan, thank you so much for just the really inspiring words. It's, you know, it's a tough following Jan's legacy.
Yeah, it's a great act to follow, and it's nice to actually see an aviation panel where there's a majority of women speaking as opposed to men. So we'll take
Definitely.
that. That's great.
Yes.
Well, Karl, I gave a little bit about your background and your experience in the Air Force, and now starting out, with your job at UPS. But is there anything in particular that you want to highlight, or things from your journey that led you to where you're at today that really stuck out in your path?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been quite the journey. I'll kind of walk myself back to when I was in high school. Um, hadn't really thought about joining the Air Force or doing ROTC or anything like that until I actually got to Syracuse.
Hmm.
And one of my really good friends was in the ROTC program there, and I thought, hey, that actually sounds like something that could be kind of cool. Might be able to, initially I was thinking being an engineer that, oh, I might want to go work for NASA someday, but hey, being in the Air Force would be cool, and I think flying an airplane sounds a lot more fun than working in a lab somewhere. So I kind of made a little bit of a pivot. Still stuck with my engineering degree, but um, decided to go into Air Force ROTC. So this was before the repeal of the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policies. So for me at the time, I was out to just a very limited number of close friends at that time. So kind of went back into the closet at the time, thinking that, hey, when you leave college, you can, if you have the job thing figured out, that I'd eventually be able to get the relationship and the family piece of my life kind of figured out later on. But getting one of those two really big monumental things was important to me. And I didn't realize at the time how difficult kind of going back into the closet would be, and kind of just the daily stresses that kind of puts on you. So the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy was repealed 10 years ago this year. So when you hear about it, it sounds like something that was archaic and a long time ago, but really within the last decade, it's not you know it's still fresh in a lot of people's minds. um, and so once the policy was repealed, I was able to come out, and was received well from everybody that I worked with. It was really nice to see that. um, and one of the biggest reasons that was kind of an easy transition was a lot of the questions that you've asked so far have been about mentorship, and I had a really good mentor who actually spoke at the last iteration of this event, Colonel Doug Hall. He was my commander at the time that the policy was repealed. So to be able to see someone who I really looked up to, really admired, who was also like me, was really inspiring to realize that, okay, I can get to that level, and I can do that sort of thing, despite the obstacles, despite all the circumstances, and to not let yourself be a victim of your circumstances, but rather let yourself become stronger because you've overcome difficult situations. And uh, that was huge for me. And so I continued on through my Air Force career. But for me, it was a very personal decision to decide to leave active duty, and not one that I took lightly. So about 3 years ago, I made the decision and started putting together my resume and all my airline applications, getting my hours and everything sorted out to begin my transition process. And I would say executing that required a level of flexibility that I wasn't prepared for, especially even though I had started so early on. Um,
Hmm.
the coronavirus pandemic hit last year, so Jan was talking about a certain number of American Airlines pilots who received job offers and never got to make it to training. So I was one of those people, and of course I told the Air Force that I was separating as soon as I got that job offer. So I was in a little bit of a limbo for a while, um, in a way that that made me nervous about my future and my career. But I kept my kept focus, kept my attitude, that, okay, well, I this is still something that I know deep in my heart that I need to do, um, and something that a dream of mine that I wanted to follow. So I made the transition from active duty to Air Force Reserves, so I can still keep my foot in the door, still have a way of flying, even if no one else knocked at the door or gave me a
Mhm.
phone call with a job offer. But it turns out that it's a great thing that I kind of stuck to my guns in a situation when a lot of my mentors at the time were saying, well, it's much safer and easier to stay in the Air Force. It's a much more stable career. But the reality was I was looking at um, a an assignment that would have taken me out of the cockpit that I did not want to go do, and then B, my partner Marcus, I couldn't justify it to myself to say, hey, let's pick up and move to some other some other state, some far away, put your life on pause to follow a career that I had no longer didn't have that personal investment in anymore. And so I was able to find still a reserve unit where I can still kind of get some of that meaning and connection and value and a really great group of people that I get to work with. And then right as I was getting hired on by them, I got an email from someone at UPS offering me an interview, and that took a few months for things to kind of work through the official system. And starting this February, I showed up. I'm actually in the hotel where we had our in-dock and our initial training, and so it's been a it's been a little bit of a wild ride, but a little bit of flexibility and some good mentorship to get to this point.
Awesome. You can say sufficiently that you're successfully that you got hired in a pandemic when everything
That's
else was going bad. So that's great.
absolutely.
So obviously, and this is, we might have people that are interested in the military on this call. We might have people that are watching it later. We also have people obviously that are interested in airline careers and passenger and cargo. What does professionalism look like in your kind of specialties in the military or in the cargo world? Obviously, you're still new to cargo, but in the military in particular, what does professionalism look like for you?
I it's funny that you use the word look, and I think we often do that. We think of it as like as a visual thing a lot of the time, and that can be good or bad. The Air Force cares a lot about your personal appearance. So when I was on active duty, I didn't have any sort of highlights or anything in my hair like I do now. Kept my hair a little bit tighter, and so there are a lot of things like that. But there, it's it can be good, but it can be bad too. It's good for good order and discipline, but it can be bad that it only goes that surface deep. And unfortunately, I've seen it in that light work out in not so good of a way, in a way that right now I think the Air Force is struggling with, um, that some people, because of their personal biases, they view professionalism, it's too tightly wound up with maleness, with masculinity, and with whiteness. And that for some people, unfortunately, I think they think that other people are, you may be too girly or too flamboyant, or acting in a way that they're unfamiliar with, having grown up in a predominantly white background, that it's something that's unfamiliar, that they view as unprofessional, when really you're just being your authentic self. And that's something that I think is going to take a lot more work. The Air Force is they've started some high level reviews to try to figure out how to crack this nut, but it's a large problem. And I don't think that until we have more people, kind of like Jan was talking about, getting in the room, then once you're in the room, you get a seat at the table, and then eventually when you're at the table, you have a speaking role at that table where important decisions are being made. But then the most important part of that step is what Jan talked about: leaving the door open for the people behind you to be able to come in and also be active participating members. And that's why organizations like NGPA and OBAP and Women in Aviation are so critical, because they keep that door open, and that's what they do.
Awesome. Well, if you could go back in time and tell your younger self at Syracuse rooting for the Orange, or at some other point in your life, something, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is setting goals for yourself, but that are like, be flexible with your goals, I guess. So it's good to be ambitious, to say, hey, I know I want to wind up as an airline pilot someday, or I want to be the chief of staff of the Air Force one day, or you name. It's good to have those goals, but I think I've seen mentors and colleagues and friends of mine kind of fall apart when they have too specific of a goal that then they can't follow that very narrow line to get there. And when they fall off that very narrow track that they've set for themselves, kind of like me with my separation plan from the Air Force initially, was, once that very narrow plan cracked, then you also have to have the flexibility to look around and say, what else is good, and what good decisions are in front of me that I can, or good options in front of me that I can choose from, without being so just narrowly focused on one specific thing.
That's really fantastic, and that's some great pieces of advice for everyone that's on this call, particularly when we do focus on that next biggest, brightest thing, because we might miss something out in the periphery that's even better. And that's great. So last but certainly not least, for the questions that I have for you, because we've covered some of the other ones we provided before in just the course of our conversation. But what makes you excited about the future of your segments of aviation? So we can talk about the reserves, we can talk about cargo, we can talk about whatever you want, but KC-46 maintenance issues aside, what makes you excited for the future of military aviation or aviation in general?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for me, so I'm new to the commercial aviation piece, so everything is new and exciting, and so that's actually a really, maybe another piece of advice for me to give to my younger self too, is remember when you're new to a new place and how you act when everything is great and exciting. Because I also, earlier this weekend, I jump seated with two pilots. I won't say what airline they were flying for, but I could tell that they were very grumpy. They were not pleased with tiny little things of the way the controller was having everyone taxi, and oh, it would be more efficient if we did this. And I feel like they had lost sight of that younger, more excited version of themselves. So if you can hold on to that, you're going to be a more pleasant person to fly with. People are going to notice that, and they're going to want to fly with you, and they're going to want to give you more opportunities.
Awesome. That's great advice. That's great insight. That's great everything. Once again, Karl, thank you for your time. Congratulations on the new gig. Looking forward to continuing to see you succeed in that new role as everything kind of coalesces and as the industry recovers. We're excited to have you join us today. We will have you obviously in the breakout session after this, and your contact info will be shared after the session as well. And so thank you once again. So speaking of breakout sessions, I'm going to ask that we move Dylan back up to the spotlight, where he will share a little bit more about how the breakout sessions will work. But before that, I actually will have to pop off this call after this. So I want to take a moment to thank all of you for taking part in this. So speakers, thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And most importantly, thank you for sharing your passion for aviation. It's important, as every one of you has mentioned, that we leave open the door for the next group. And I think you've all done a great job with that. And finally, I really do want to take a moment to thank all of the student planners for participating and for planning this. I would not have been able to do this without the help of Dylan, Devin, Jacqueline, all of the other team members from the NGPA member universities that are passionately putting this stuff together. So on behalf of NGPA, on behalf of the board of directors in particular, I want to take a moment to thank you and congratulate you on a job well done. And also want to take a moment to thank Luke as well for helping out with this. He is our director, administrative, I don't remember what his title is, but Luke is what makes everything run behind the scenes. So thank you once again to Luke, and thank you to our students for this fantastic opportunity. And I look forward to seeing it continue to grow and hopefully do one of these in person in the future. So Dylan, it might not be you, but it might be somebody else, one of the other students that's on this, planning this in the future. So Dylan, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Martin, for all those words. And just a final thank you to Martin as well for all your great work facilitating our conversations here. Always great to have you on, and definitely hope we can do some future events together.
It's my pleasure. You all know where to find me if you need anything. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the next slide here. All right, so we will move now into the second half of our session here, and that's going to be with Angie Marshall today, who is representing Cage Marshall Consulting, and she's just going to provide her feedback and tips on the aviation industry right now and how to navigate the process of applying to jobs, how you can kind of tailor your resume towards a certain position to craft your skill set, to make sure that that job is seeing all of the skills that you bring to the table. Talking about stuff from, again, professionalism. We've been talking about it a lot today, so I won't spoil the future of what she has down the road for us, but I will go ahead and introduce her to the stage. I know that Angie works a lot with NGPA. She is one of the NGPA partners, she and her company, for just providing consulting services for members as well. And she's very renowned within the industry for her insights and skills for those who are pursuing like airline jobs mostly, but definitely applies to all areas of the industry. So welcome, Angie. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. It's good to see everyone. Although I'm telling you, those first 3 acts are going to be really, really tough for me to follow. So I was looking at my resume thinking I'm totally an underachiever, so I need to do some things. So, but that was awesome. But thank you all very much. I'm Angie Marshall, and I am the president of Cage Marshall Consulting. And actually, my world of aviation started 30 plus years ago. When I started doing, actually, I started out in veterinary medicine, of all things. And I fell backwards into the pilot interview world. This woman named Cheryl Cage happened to come into a vet hospital that I was working in with a sick dog. And she asked if I would help her and her dog. And so I saved her dog that night. I stayed up with it all night. And from there, I was offered a job. And I often joke that had I not kept her dog alive, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this today. So it's a little bit of an interesting path, but moving on up, 95, 94, Cheryl and I actually had some contract work that we did with legacy and regional carriers, and we did background checks and we did pilot interviewing and pre-screening interviews back in the day when the interviews were live and in person. And so that's kind of moved us forward. I've done everything from pilot interviews, but I've also worked with people who are in the aviation industry that are not pilots. So I've worked with managerial positions. I've worked with folks that are going into CFI positions, ATC, dispatch. While the pilots are a larger section of what we do, we've had that opportunity. One of the things that happened with Cage is that we actually started this company in the late 80s, early 90s, and we were a general job search company. And so we've always had kind of that undercurrent with the company where we've always done some general job search. So one of the things that we've been able to juggle, especially more so after this pandemic, is the fact that when the aviation industry turns upside down, we stay a lot with general job search information. And so I'm going to share with you some information that's going to be a lot about pilot stuff, but also some things that I think will tie into some of those of you that may not be heading down that path necessarily of the pilot side. So kind of tie in the presentation from last weekend, if for those of you that attended to some of the presentation, hopefully with today. And you know what, Dylan, it's not letting me screen share. Oh, there we go.
Okay, I just needed to stop mine.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. Let me pull up the slides, and I'm going to try not to do death by PowerPoint, or to bore everybody to death. But even after all of these years, after all of the pilots I've worked with who are furloughed, who are retiring, who are entering the industry, career changers, folks that are just wanting to be in aviation in general, I'm still very passionate about this. I still get very excited to see people succeed and to move forward, and all of the barriers that are being broken right now in the industry. Holy cow, 30 years ago, as Jan had mentioned, it's the times have changed, and it's about time. Being a woman in an aviation industry, and even though I wasn't on the flight deck, there's been a lot of hurdles to overcome. And so it's just wonderful to see you guys hosting this workshop and talking about these things, because we're at the door of something really wonderful, and this is so. Anyway, let me just go over the agenda real quickly here. We have been talking a lot about professionalism, and so I do want to talk real quickly about some increasing your odds for career success as you're moving forward. We'll talk about the pilot resume, non-flying resume. I'll go over real quickly for those of you that are in aviation but not need to go into the flight deck. We'll talk about applications briefly, some job search strategies, as well as the interview, and just some closing thoughts. One of the things that has been brought up quite a bit is the word professionalism, and everybody has, I think, some different wonderful adjectives to describe professionalism. And I think that, but as a whole, I think everybody has the right idea. Professionalism is so many different things. Professionalism is just not one thing. Professionalism is a whole network of things that come together that show how somebody is going to carry themselves and handle themselves when they come to work with somebody, or when they're speaking to someone, or when they go out into the world to present themselves. So professionalism for me, who a career coach, who tries to help people get to their next level, is a lot about foundational work. It's not something that you just wake up the next morning and say, this is going to happen for me. It's a lot about some of the things that you need to put into it. So professionalism, in a way that you can help yourself move more smoothly and fluidly towards your ultimate career goals, would be things that you start working on today. And it's a foundation. As Jan had mentioned, this doesn't happen overnight. This is not a sprint. It is absolutely a marathon. But if you set yourself up for success, things will become much easier as you go through it. So attitude's everything, isn't it? So making sure you have a positive attitude, moving through the process. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, but how you address them is important. We always say here at CMC, it's not the manner in which you fall, it's the grace by which you pick yourself up. And when you have an obstacle, do you turn it into an opportunity? And if you are somebody that by continuing to move through some of the challenges and adversities that you're faced with, that will help to dictate and show that character, that positive attitude towards a company. Self-restraint with social media, just real quickly. Interviewers look at social media. I do background checks still for companies, and social media is now something that we can look into. So be professional with your social media at all times. If you're mad at somebody and want to tell them, send them a text. No, I'm kidding. Also, complete, accurate, and organized paperwork. As one of, I think it was Jan had mentioned as well, what we're looking for is to make sure that your paperwork is accurate. That is a sign of professionalism. When you take the time to fill out your paperwork and your resumes and your application completely, transparently, and it shows, it just changes the whole dynamic of an interview process or how somebody sees you. Well-groomed appearance is something else that obviously, regardless of the position you're going for, self-care and showing that you are concerned and you do know the way you look when you go to these interviews or when you put yourself out there for work, it does matter. Demonstrate knowledge and interest in the company. So if you do have an interview or you're wanting to get an interview or you're interested in doing something for that company, don't just go up there and say, hey, I heard the name of your company one time. I'd love to work here. Show some depth of knowledge. Show them that you're excited about this opportunity. I don't want to hear the words, I'm enthusiastic about being here. Prove it to me by actually displaying to me that you've got some knowledge about what the company is. Your ability to read and follow directions. And this is true with any of these jobs. Read the directions, read the directions, read the directions, and follow them. When we get an application in and half of the questions have not been answered, somebody hasn't followed directions, we view that as somebody who's not interested. So make sure you read the directions and follow them. And then obviously, especially if you're just starting in this industry with probably the ages that you were at, life will be so much easier moving forward in your career if you try to maintain, you don't have to be perfect, but try to maintain a clean employment, educational, driving, and training record. The less you have to go to an airline interview and explain, where your kind of anomalies in life took place, the more comfortable you will be and the smoother the interviews will be. Let me talk about real quickly, and I'm sorry I'm running through a bunch of stuff here for you, but I've got a lot of, I've got like 5 pounds of, or 10 pounds of information to pack in a 5-pound bag here. But when it comes to resumes, pilot resumes are very unique. They're unlike any other resume in any other industry. I have worked with scientists, I have worked with psychologists, I've worked with doctors, I've worked with people from all of life. And the pilot resume has still, tried and true, been one of the more unique ones. So when people give you advice and say, let me do your resume for you, I work HR at Amazon. Well, that's nice, but chances are you're not going to get a true pilot resume. So they should be one page. They need to be more focused on the facts and not so much on your soft skills. So trying to tell them that you are an effective communicator and you like talking to people and that you're customer service centric and things like that, putting all of that stuff on a pilot resume may not be the best place for it. So you have to utilize one page pretty successfully. Make sure your resume is easy to read, that it's well organized. Keep in mind, again, the pilot world, unlike most worlds out there, aside from that, a lot of these resumes are actually looked at by human eyes at some point. And so you want to make sure that it's easy for them to get the information to qualify you. Make sure that you have clear categories on your resume so they can quickly determine that you have the skill set that they're looking for. I know this is going to be a little bit tiny, but here's an example of, and I just made this up for perhaps the skill set that you are all at with your life and with your career right now. So I tried to model it not as necessarily a worldly traveler as Danny and Jan and Karl are right now. But here are some things that you can consider for a resume: clean, neat, to the point. Make it easy for them to follow along with the information. Your resumes don't have to look like this. This is just a sample of the way that you can put some information on your resume so that they can see very quickly what your certificates and ratings are, what your flight times are, especially if you're going for a CFI position or you're going for your first regional job or maybe a charter job or contract work. So, show your education as well. What did I just do there? How do I shrink that back down? Did I blow that up? You know what? I just froze, Danny or Dylan. I'm sorry.
It might. I've had this problem before where it's like an embedded thing within a PowerPoint. It might just be easier to like close your PowerPoint and then
gotcha.
just bring
I'm
it back
so
open.
sorry, everybody. Believe it or not, I really do work with
It looks great to me. I've never actually been able to. That's I didn't know that it had that functionality where you could have a slide that you could zoom in on, like during the presentation.
Well, apparently you're not supposed to.
I guess that's a downfall.
I think I just proved that. Let's see if it does this. No, it's still stuck. Well, that's terrible. That's just terrible. Okay, we'll just pull up this other slide then and we'll move on. My apologies, everyone. So that's kind of an idea of what you can do with a.
Oh, it might be going.
It is still so stuck, isn't it?
If you want, I can
Oh, there we
share.
go.
Oh, okay, perfect.
There we go. My apologies. Okay. So Zoom one-on-one, if you're doing an interview or presentation, know how the heck to run the PowerPoint. So so there we go. Can you see it okay, Dylan?
I can't see it. It might have stopped sharing.
Oh. Let's go back here.
Oh, perfect. Okay, it's coming up now.
Is it coming up? Okay,
Perfect.
gotcha. So there we go. All right. So we're gonna zip on by that one. Okay, good. Whew, that was scary.
Great.
As far as a resume for non-flying, for those of you that may not be necessarily looking for a flying position, a CFI or a charter pilot, going into the flying side of things, it's still important to have a very neat and organized resume for everybody to follow along. It's going to be a little bit more complex than a pilot resume, but it's going to have some things that are not like what's on a pilot resume. So if you are looking to go into non-flying, recognize that even the resume is going to be completely different. It can be 2 pages. Obviously, if you're just starting in your career, you're going to probably only have 1 page, and that's completely acceptable. It's going to be more focused on the hard facts, but it's going to be mixed with some of those soft skills and keywords from posting, which is kind of not something that we do for the pilots. And then again, it needs to be easy to read and well organized. So something along these lines would be an idea for a non-flying job. So we've got the summary, we've got the skills, we've got the certifications, professional experience, education. And what you do is you take some of those keywords from the ad they're looking for and you infuse them into the resume in order because unfortunately for some of these other jobs, with the exception of pilots to some extent, you will have algorithms or what they call ATSs, applicant tracking systems, that actually are going to search and scan for certain opportunities to qualify you. It's not very often that a human being will look at a resume for a non-flying position. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, let's kind of talk about applications here a little bit. One of my biggest recommendations for applicants when they are filling out any job application is to recognize the job application is truly your lifeline, and it is truly the most solid foundation you will ever have to have success with any company. Because if your application does not look good, or your application is incomplete, or it is not, you have not been transparent with information on these applications, it could absolutely result in you not being hired for a position or even getting called for a job. So if you are doing anything, when you are preparing for an interview, I say the things that you need to do before you hopefully get the interview is to make sure your resume and your applications are as on top as you can possibly get them. Make sure that you read every application's directions completely. Every application is going to have a different set of directions. One application may say they want a 10-year employment history, while another one may say they want a complete employment history back to high school. Another one may say it wants all of the places you've lived for 5 years. Another one may say for the last 10 years. So my recommendation is to always, because a lot of you will probably start looking to fill out your applications here pretty quickly, especially with the airlines starting to open up again and doing a lot of hiring, you're going to be in a hurry to run to your computer and start tapping on those keys and get that application done. But I'm going to caution you to slow down. Take your time with the application. Make sure it is accurate. Make sure it's transparent. Make sure it is complete. Make sure you follow their directions, and do one application at a time. People get very confused and say, well, no, I'm sure it said 10 years on that. Well, that was the application you filled out an hour before. So fill it out, follow directions, submit it. That's going to be a really good place for you. The other thing is that you want to be concise on your applications. You don't want to kind of give them a college thesis when they ask for certain explanations. There is a way that you can still be concise, but not necessarily be verbose when it comes to filling out your applications. So make sure that you don't cross one line or the other. I always say, don't equate a good answer with a long answer. You need to give them the information that they need, but there are ways that you can certainly do it in a much more efficient manner. So make sure that you take some time on those areas as well. And when able, with these applications, some of these applications will allow you to go back in and update them frequently. And I would say to do so. There are some applications that once you submit it, it's gone. And you just have to wait maybe a year to update your information, or 6 months. But if it's an application that allows you to go in there every month, go in there every month and update it if you can. Make sure that you keep your resumes updated as well, on the off chance that you have somebody that says, I heard you submitted your application. Do you have a resume? I'd like to take it to my boss and have them take a look at your application online. So when you update your application, update your resume as well. Always keep those in a really good place. A couple things too that I wanted to bring up with this is that, and I didn't put this on here, I have had some folks that have asked about cover letters, and cover letters I think are always a good idea to have. 90% of the time, well, it depends on the industry you're in. 90% of the time, the cover letters are not really looked at, especially in the pilot side of things, 121. But if you're going corporate or charter, or you're trying to apply for a CFI position, or you know a friend who works at that company, having a cover letter can absolutely be hugely beneficial. So I always recommend that you have a live, healthy, updated cover letter that you have on your computer. So if you have those opportunities where somebody wants to hand carry in a resume or a cover letter to their boss or to their friend, you can print those off pretty quickly and they're updated and send it on their way. I get a lot of calls from pilots that say, or anybody that says, hey, my buddy wants to walk in my resume and cover letter, and I'm wondering if you can help me get that written. I'm like, sure, when's it due? And they say, oh, in about 2 hours. And I'm like, wow, no pressure. So make sure that you keep up to date with that information as well. Let's talk about some job search strategies. Now that I've already told you about your resume, cover letter, and application, there's going to be some ideas for how you can have some job search help. One of the biggest things that I can recommend when you're looking for a job is networking. Approximately 80% of people will find their next job or a lead for a next job based on who they talk to and the networking that they do. Networking is also a part of professionalism. When you talk to people, when you show people that you're articulate and that you are genuinely interested and that you are kind, people are more willing to want to work with you and to start bringing you along with them to where they find openings. They're going to be more willing to want to help you. So having those opportunities to network is going to be huge. These opportunities within NGPA are awesome. Anytime you can go to the in-person or the virtual job fairs, there's always a lot of information. That's a form of networking. If you are somebody that is, LinkedIn is another great opportunity. LinkedIn is very professional. You want to keep it professional, but LinkedIn is a great place to research companies and information, because oftentimes they will post events and opportunities that they're having on LinkedIn. So it's a great chance for you to do that. Attending these, any of these career expos or these job fairs, these development conference series, whenever you can, I think it's not only worthwhile for networking, but it's hugely educational. And as Jan had mentioned, keeping your finger on the pulse of aviation, even when things are a little bit down or you're trying to find work, is going to be instrumental in making sure that you stay mentally in the right place, to make sure that you keep the right attitude. And it always allows for a potential for an opportunity for you to go in and grab hold of. So attending these events is just, as far as I'm concerned, you just need to do it. Now's a great time to start gathering letters of recommendation and references. This could be from college professors. This can be from your first bosses. This can be from your coworkers. Any places that maybe you have done volunteer work. And I'm not telling you to go and grab a whole bunch of these letters of recommendation, but I have found people that 20 and 30 years after the fact have found their letters of recommendation, and they have managed to work their way one way or another into an interview. So recommendations show us that you have had a good history with a strong work ethic, that you're dependable, that you are somebody who is efficient and somebody who is a quick learner. Those are all great words that people throw around at the interview, but as a former interviewer for a legacy, one of the things I wanted to not hear were the words, but I wanted your stories to show me proof of those words. And these letters of recommendation give you that foundation to show that proof of that determination and that work ethic. Volunteer work. I do think volunteer work is definitely beneficial, and it's for a couple of reasons. It's not to toot your own horn and to go out there and say, I volunteer, so, look at me, kind of a thing. But it allows you to it gets you into the community. It gets you into contributing back. It allows people to see that, it allows you actually to see those opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have seen had you not volunteered. I've had several folks that I've worked with that have gone to do volunteer work, and a job has resulted from it as well. That's also part of networking, but it's also an opportunity for you to get really involved and help those that really need some help. In contributing back is really quite important. So if you have time and you have the opportunity, look at some of those as well. It's not something I say go volunteer so you can put it on your resume or put it on your application. It needs to be genuine, but those can be great opportunities as well. Also, don't be afraid to try something new. Some folks say, oh my gosh, I don't want to look at that job. I don't want to consider that job. That's completely out of my wheelhouse. Well, I challenge you to go back in there and look at it and say, what does speak to me? Does this job in some way resolve a situation that I'm having right now? Does it help fix my finances? Does it help me get to school? Does it help me save money for flight training? Get creative with that. Maybe I need to go and wash some planes so that I can buy some flight lessons. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to try, so that you can make sure that you get into the industry that you so want to be involved with. We'll talk about the interview, just some highlights for the interview. When it comes to the interview, there's going to be a few main categories that most interviewers are going to be looking at. And this is across the board, whether you're going for a pilot position or you are going for a non-pilot position. Most companies are going to be looking for applicants that display some level of these characteristics. They're looking to see about your attitude. They're looking to see about your decision-making skills and your problem-solving skills. They're looking to see about your communication and conflict resolution skills. They'll be looking at your team orientation or team building. Do you foster teamwork in the way that you work with others? What is your learning ability? Are you somebody who's trainable? Leadership, how does leadership look to you? Are you somebody who leads by example, and sometimes I use that carefully because some people, they have an example where they shouldn't lead by, but what kind of a leader are you? Are you somebody who quietly earns respect, or are you somebody who overtly asks for it or demands it? Are you somebody who is arrogant, or somebody who is simply confident that people feel comfortable and safe with? These are all the kinds of things that the interviewers are going to be looking for. And that's why they ask some of the questions that they will ask, if not on applications, during the interview processes themselves. So when you start to really understand what the interview process is about, it becomes a little less overwhelming. So the interview atmosphere is not about trying to keep you from being hired. This is not their way of saying we can only hire 5 people. So out of the 15 we're interviewing, we got to get rid of 10. They're saying, how many of these applicants can we bring on board? How many would work well with our company? How many can I physically, emotionally, and mentally work with that would be a good fit for our company and for our culture? So don't take some of the interview process personally. You can't argue with the application. You can't argue with the test that they give you. It's not about that. This is what their process is. So don't take it personal. And their questions are not meant to be personal either. There are questions about, tell us a time when, tell us about your check ride training, tell us about, when are you going to finish college, or why did you get a D in algebra, Angie? I got a lot of D's, by the way. But, those kinds of things they're going to be asking you about, and you can't take it personally and say, they hate me and they're picking on me. They're trying to learn about you. They're trying to learn about your reaction time. They're trying to learn about how you resolve problems. They're trying to figure out if you are somebody that is really uncomfortable when somebody addresses situations with you, if you're somebody that is humble, if you take accountability, if you're somebody that is a creative thinker. All of these different things, they're trying to measure in the questions they ask you about. Keep in mind too that when you're talking to them, you're there more to inform than entertain. Some applicants view the interview, especially from the pilot side of things, as though they are there to kind of entertain the audience, which is your interviewers. And that usually doesn't go over very well. You're there to inform them, not create tomorrow's Hallmark movie for them. Also, it's one of the things that it's going to be really hard for applicants to do is it's really hard to say, no, that has never happened to me when they ask you an interview question. The interviewers are very good at knowing what your level is of experience that you can bring to the table. And so they know the levels of questions that they can ask you. So if they say, tell us about a conflict you had with a coworker, unless you've never had a job, that you will be able to come up with some kind of a response to that. So be a little bit careful with that. Do yourself a favor and use silence to your benefit during the interview, and think about the story, or think about the question they've asked and the story you would like to give them. Think about an experience that you've had from all of your history with maybe doing organizational work or projects for a university, or for maybe a club that you've been involved with, to maybe your first jobs at Amazon or FedEx. Think about all of those stories and examples in that life that you've had that you can create information to deliver to the interviewers. Some of the types of questions that you can experience when you go to an interview, especially in the world of aviation. Some of you have probably already heard of the TMAT form. Tell me about a time when question. What would you do if types of questions, and the guided conversational questions, which I do a lot of the guided conversational questions as well outside of the aviation industry. But let me kind of break those down a little bit for you. So tell me about a time. Questions mean we want to ask you a question of when this has happened to you, and we want a specific story. Tell me about a time you had a conflict. A response such as, gosh, you know what? I try to always resolve my conflicts. I never get mad at anybody. I get along with everyone. I've always gotten really good recommendations. And so, no, I can't answer that question. That's not going to fly at the interview. Versus, Oh yeah, I remember this time. I was a brand new flight instructor. So this is about 6 weeks ago when I was flying at this company. And I had this other instructor that came in and she thought that I had made this mistake with the schedule. There's that one specific story that an interviewer is looking for in the tell me about a time when story. So from this point forward, my recommendation to all applicants going for pilot positions or non-flying positions is you keep a notebook. I call it my little book of secrets. Keep a notebook and start writing down all of these things every day you get home from work, because trust me, when you finally get an interview, this little book of secrets will be so much help for you when you get to an actual interview and they say, tell us about a time when you could not resolve a problem. You're like, oh my God, I have a story. And that was with another flight instructor I had or with my former manager. Bam, go right to it. Some of you have probably heard the story, the STAR format. Organize your story with the STAR format. And this is beginning, middle, and end. You always want to set your stories up so it's easy for your interviewers to take notes and to be able to visualize and follow along with the story you're telling them. Again, you are proving to us that you have these techniques and that you have these characteristics to resolve problems. So I need you to tell me a specific story. And by your organization of how you deliver that story is going to be really important for the interviewers to be able to see that you actually display and practice those characteristics on a daily basis. Also, a little bit of dialogue can go a long way in a story. You don't have to say everything verbatim. You may have to paraphrase some things. But when you tell me, I went to my boss and I said, hey, I'm uncomfortable with the schedule. I thought we talked about this. And she said, you know what? You agreed that you could work Sundays. And I said, yes, but I said that there would be a few Sundays I would need off. And she said, well, that's not my problem. You need to go and talk to the lead. That little bit of dialogue can really carry a story pretty far during an interview because it actually shows us how you connect to people. Do you choose your words wisely? Are you mature? Are you somebody that is diplomatic? Are you somebody who is persuasive? Those are the kinds of things that interviewers are also going to be looking for. Like I said, don't go ad nauseum with them, but some of that can definitely be beneficial in the tell me about a time when stories. Another place that you could look at, or another way that they can do their questions, again, on either side of the fence, would be what would you do if types of questions. So what would you do if your coworker came to you and said that he was uncomfortable with a comment that was made by another team member? In the what would you do if questions, they are looking for what you think you would do. How would you react? Tell me about a time is done, it's in the past, it's happened. The what would you do if, they're looking more for your reasoning skills. They're looking more for that creative thinking process. They're looking for, for you to be able to manage the situation without escalating it too quickly and without running away from it completely. Because you're always going to have situations that will come up at any job. So how would you're going to be going for a management position, with an FBO, and so we need to know how you handle these situations. So if somebody comes to you and says that they're uncomfortable with a coworker, what are you going to do? So we always say use the ASI method. Ask questions, offer suggestions, and then implement or initiate your final decision. So before jumping to any conclusions, clarify the information. Ask about more information. Who, what, when, why, where. Oh my gosh, can you tell me what was said? What made you uncomfortable? Who was it that said this? What was the setting? Things along those lines you can certainly ask questions about. Then offer some possible options. What are some suggestions? Can the situation be resolved amicably? I don't know what he was doing, but I'll go talk to him or her. And then we can come and we can talk about it and figure out if we can resolve it together. Or is it something that does at this point need to be escalated to the next level? And then take action. Once you have gathered your information, you've made some mindful suggestions as to the appropriate way to resolve the situation. What are your next steps? Does it need to go to a supervisor or to a lead, or do you need to go to the next level with the situation if you've not been able to resolve it between the two? And then lastly, another way that they can do their interviews is what we call conversational interview. And this is being asked a question based on previous information. So tell me about a time when your crew was showing signs of stress and how did you handle it? And now you walk me through their story, and then the interviewer comes back and says, gosh, you know, how were the passengers showing their frustration in the situation? Or how were you guys showing signs of stress? How did you know your flight attendant was stressed? Have you ever flown when you were, you know, when you were tired as well? What do you do when you get stressed? So sometimes based on a story that you've given, sometimes your interviewers can come back and use that as a platform to create some conversational style questions. Not gonna lie, it's really easy to kind of get people too casual in the conversational interview. I have had people call me dude during an interview. I have had people call me, oh, hun, you would have no idea kind of things during these interviews. So people have a tendency to get a little bit too comfortable and casual. So it's really important that throughout the entire interview process, no matter how friendly, no matter how comfortable the interviewers try to make you, you're at an interview. So you have to keep that in mind. Let's talk real quickly, and I want to make sure I'm done on time for you guys, about some of the interview mediums. Obviously, everybody went virtual to do their interviews and to do their presentations. And I have one company I did contract work for to do some interviews with. And these are not just pet peeves, but these are things you got to keep in mind. Some companies are going to continue to do phone and virtual interviews. And then if you pass that phase, then you get to come in for an in-person interview. Some of them will not even do the in-persons for a while. So they will just do phone and virtual for you. So there's a few things to keep in mind when you are doing an interview. Use a computer rather than a cell phone or a tablet, because I cannot tell you how many noses I have looked up into when people are holding their cell phone and their tablet as I'm doing the interview. Or I get seasick because they're walking around with their phone and I'm just like, just sit down, I need Dramamine. So use a stationary computer for this. You also want to make sure that you're well positioned, and that so that you're not sitting in a chair where you're going to be swiveling back and forth, or that you're going to be rocking. Those kinds of things can be very distracting to the interviewers. Ensure that the background in your surrounding areas and space are neat and clutter-free, and avoid anything that could be misinterpreted or distracting. I had an applicant that I was interviewing for, he was interviewing for Verizon, for a flight position at Verizon. But right behind him, he had a T-Mobile, something T-Mobile that was right behind him. Probably not the best thing to have when you're interviewing for Verizon. So make sure that I don't see your dirty laundry. Make sure I don't see your unmade bed, your dirty dishes, or a different company's, posters behind you when we're doing the interview. Make sure that you're in a well-lit room and that there's not a lot of glare from the computer screen. I've had people sitting right in front of a window and literally they look like an angel, which was great. I mean, it was very comforting. But if I can't see you, it's really hard to connect with you. Be sure that you were in a quiet, uninterrupted area, and so that because noises can be very amplified. I had somebody, in the whole time I was doing his interview, he was doing that, and that's clicking a pen. Now for him, he didn't notice it. For me as the interviewer, it drove me crazy. So you want to make sure that you're in a quiet area, and if you have people at your house that are loud and obnoxious, maybe you need to, make sure that you have them out of the house in time for your interview. Plug in your computer. I can't tell me how many people I have interviewed and their computers die in the middle of the interview. And then it pushes everything back and we're frustrated. Plug it in. Videos can make applicants appear very flat. So you become one-dimensional. And so it's not to say that you have to suddenly become the Joker, hi, during your interview, but you need to understand that some people can lose some of that connection during that period of time. And eye contact is equally as important. So when somebody is looking down this whole time and they just do this when they're at the interview, I'm still not getting a good impression. You don't do that in person, and you don't want to do that on the video. Wear your suit head to toe, no exceptions. You need to look good for the job. Look for the position you hopefully want to be in. That's why you want to dress up. Put some time and effort into it. Again, there's that level of professionalism. When you do get the in-person interview, congratulations, but make sure you're not late for the interview. Again, we've had applicants that show up late. I had this one applicant, and we went through, he couldn't understand why he didn't get hired. And because of COVID, they had to go through COVID security. And we debriefed his entire interview. And I said, gosh, I don't know. You were technically on point. Your HR was great. Your paperwork was perfect. He goes, well, there was one thing. He said, I kind of got lost on the way to the place, and I was about 15 minutes late. Do you think that may have affected the outcome of the interview? And I said, yes. There are thousands of people out there looking for jobs, and you were 15 minutes late. Did that affect the interview? Yes, absolutely it did. So you want to make sure that when you show up for the interview, you show up on time. Be on your best behavior all the way to the interview and all the way home. You never know, especially in the airlines. If you're a pilot, they know when you're flying somewhere to interview. So make sure you are on your best behavior, and always, 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 until COVID restrictions are lifted, be sure that you are very vigilant of reading their protocols for COVID. If you show up to an interview and they've asked you to bring a mask in and you don't have one, I've had applicants that have been turned away for the interview. So make sure you follow those restrictions. And then I'll just go through a couple of sample questions that you could hear at interviews. Again, this is flying, and this could be non-flying as well. So get ready for things to discuss, like, tell us about yourself. How long have you been applying here? Why are you interested in this position? Why would you be good at this position? If you're going for ATC or dispatch, why would you be good at this job? Do you have any training failures, especially for a pilot? Tell us about your training issues, stage checks, phase checks. If you're military, Q3s, downs, unsats. For a civilian, any of your check rides in the 61, 141, 142 area. Do you have any personal or professional experience with our company? How do you know about us? Have you used our product before? What has that experience been like? Tell me about a time when you were unable to resolve a conflict. Tell us a time you went above and beyond for customer service. Tell us a time you had an idea to solve and you had to convince or persuade others to follow you. Tell us a time when you were justifiably criticized. What would you do if you had two coworkers having a verbal disagreement in front of customers? What would you do if you saw a coworker breaking a policy? What would you do if you saw a coworker sleeping on the job? That one I'd be jealous, not gonna lie. But anyway, so these are all possibilities of things that can take place during your interview. So being prepared to some extent is absolutely helpful. It's not about being canned. It's not about being rehearsed. It's not about saying, I have to say these exact words in this exact order for me to get hired. Interviewers are looking for what I call ATP. They're looking for authenticity, transparency, personable, and professional. But that also comes with making sure you do your due diligence to show up for that interview polished. Know your history, know your background, know your information, fill out your paperwork accurately, take it seriously, because these jobs will be the foundation for you to get to that next level. Probably most of you are not where you want to be just yet. You're still working on that. And by building these strong relationships and these strong foundations with your employers now, it will pay dividends in the end. Like Jan said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's going to take some time to get there, but it will happen. But if you take these steps, it'll be so much easier for you. So here's some homework for everybody. Start journaling your professional stories, organizational stories, and educational stories. Make sure when you start filling out your applications and resumes that they are updated, completed, accurate, and you've read the directions. Make sure, for those of you that are pilots, take good care of your logbooks. I can't impress that enough. your logbooks are, no kidding, the backbone for you. So keep your logbooks updated, keep them clean, keep them neat, keep them safe. Become comfortable with webinar chats. If you're uncomfortable talking in front of people you don't know, you may have to start working on that. There's some practice things you can do. Begin gathering paperwork, including your letters of recommendation. So start going through and getting those letters as you're working with folks, and start networking. And make sure you look at this as everybody you meet, everybody you talk to is somebody that you may see again in the future. And it may be a relationship that you can build upon down the road. So don't take any of them for granted. So, did I finish on time, Dylan?
I think so, and I think even a little bit early. So, yeah, awesome.
So I wanted to get all of that information in there. So I know I went a little bit fast, and I probably threw a lot at you. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a head start for getting some of this paperwork done and some career and job search strategies, so that you can move on and be very successful moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I really liked the tip of journaling and like keeping a record of your professional experiences, because I didn't even think about that until very recently when I noticed a friend that does that, and I was like, oh, I didn't think to write everything down. They're like, yeah, I write it down like the day it happens, because otherwise I'll forget about it.
Yeah.
And then when I'm interviewing later for something, I can never remember. And I always know I have a good story. I knew I did something like that, but I can't bring up the specific details. So I definitely need to go back. And I have like a couple go-to stories for sure. That's like when a coworker disagreed with you, or a customer disagreed with you, or you had to do something that was against what your manager wanted, but it was justified. Like, how did you do that? I have some like canned go-to stories, but the details are a little cloudy sometimes. So I think that's definitely something that I personally will be focusing on.
Oh, good. And logbooks are a great little diary too. When you go back through and you look at your logbooks, for some people, they write down a lot of information in their logbooks. And even if it's just your trip, it's like, oh, I remember that student. And I remember we had that horrible storm, and we wound up having to land at this, unknown place, and we had to hang out underneath the dugout for 3 hours. And then we were able to get back and, do those things. So sometimes going through your logbooks, it can actually work as a bit of a diary as well. But definitely keeping that little book of secrets has just been instrumental for a lot of pilots when they're preparing for interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point too. I wasn't actually thinking about it in a pilot sense, but like, when I do write stuff in a logbook, I try to keep half of it like technical information about the flight, like what were the winds, that kind of stuff. But I try to also include like, like third flight of the day, like was feeling tired, blah, blah, blah. That's landings were terrible, blah, blah, blah. But translating that into, you could even have a book that's adjacent to your logbook that's like even further after you've logged the flight, you've debriefed, you've closed your flight plan, whatever. Now you're just sitting down, like catching your breath before you drive home or something. That's also a great opportunity to write some stuff down.
Absolutely. In the evenings when you've got a couple of days off, it's like, oh, yeah, I need to write that situation down. Now, on the flip side, be careful what you do put in your logbooks, because when you go to an interview, your logbooks are part of your permanent documentation that the airlines will look at. And comments are a big deal. I had this one logbook that I was looking at, and there was some little colored dots in certain places on the logbook, and I couldn't figure it out. Well, of course, I searched and I searched and I searched, and I finally figured it out. So during the interview, we asked him, we said, so, because we already knew the answer. We said, so, looks like you have some, varying colors of dots here in your logbook. Can you tell us about that? And he goes, yeah, that's usually for the severity of flight we've had. And I said, oh, or is it for how you rated all of the females that you flew with? He goes, oh yeah, maybe that's what it was, because we had found his color code. in his logbooks, you know, or people that they didn't like. I had somebody who wrote down that they had crew mutiny on board the plane that day. I mean, people do some crazy things in their logbook because they think it's their own personal diary. And then they make a decision to go professional. And these logbooks are going to be a permanent record keeping method for you moving forward forever and ever as a pilot. Even if you make it to a legacy carrier, if that's your dream, or to your corporate, you know, job, and that's your dream. If the industry turns upside down, as we see every few years, you're going to be out there pounding the pavement again. And you're going to have to dig those logbooks back out, and you're going to have to show them again. So, you know, just make sure you use that level of professionalism with them as well as you do everything else.
I wanted to vouch for Cage Marshall. I used them for my interview. Yes. Hey, Angie, how are you? I used Cage Marshall for my interview with United, but I also did interviews with, I was an interviewer at Endeavor. And so I conducted interviews. I got to practice doing several interviews myself, interviewing at different companies. And the principles that Angie laid out are, I mean, they're just tried and true. Especially, I think one of the most helpful things was putting together a list of stories, because you can pretty much use that no matter what question you get. If you've got 10 good stories, you can take different parts of each story and use that to talk your way through an interview. There's other things you got to be able to talk about, but yeah. Cage Marshall, they have books as well. You guys sell some books. I know that I forget who's published them, but you guys have books that you've authored there that are really helpful aviation interview guides. So yeah, I just want to say, like, she's not making anything up. What Angie's telling you is really important. And I honestly, I wish I'd had this when I was in college. Some really straightforward, this is how you get ready for interviews going forward. So
well, thank you, Troy. It is. And, you know, there's so many pilots that when they get to this level, like, you know, like some of you are now, where it's like, if I would have known then what I know now, I could have avoided some heartburn and having to disclose and discuss this at an interview or on an application. And so that's what the goal is to say, you know, like I said, you don't have to be a perfect angel, but you do need to care for your career now, because you know, as Troy has even seen as an interviewer, you know, there are some things that you just don't want to have to talk to an interviewer about, you know, because they ask everything from, you know, public intox to urinating in public to, you know, your D in algebra, again, Angie, D's in algebra to, you know, all of these things, you know, why did you drop out of this school? It looks like you went to 3 different colleges before you finally went to this college. These are the kinds of things that whether you're going for a pilot interview or even some of the just aviation interviews outside of the pilot realm, they can ask these questions because they're trying to measure your character. They're trying to measure your problem solving skills, and accountability and humility. So all of these things are fair game for an interview. Yeah. Oh, there's a question. As a young pilot, I already botched some of my logbook entries to where it is quite a mess. How do I go about correcting all of this so it looks good again? You know, a lot of airlines are now accepting electronic logbooks. So if you have the opportunity, start transferring things to an electronic logbook. Unfortunately, if you've got kind of a hot mess, which a lot of people do in their, I call it the baby book, that initial training book where you get your private pilot, instrument, commercial, multi-engine, CFI, CFII, you know, that book doesn't always look the prettiest because not everybody is really kind of focused on that flying career at that point. But unfortunately, it's you got to keep it with you because your endorsements and your sign-offs are in there. So just hang on to it, but start transferring things now to an electronic logbook. And when you go to an interview, you can print that electronic logbook out and you can take it with you. And then when they compare them and they say, wow, Angie, what did you do in your logbook? I can say, I know. I didn't know that I was going to be a professional pilot when I started this. And so it was ugly. And that's why the second I realized how bad it was and that I wanted to make this my future career, I said, that's it. I'm going to get an electronic logbook. It's accurate. It's on point. I use that as obviously memento, but also because my permanent, sign off and signatures are in there. So you can see that information as well. So just because you have a mistake, don't think that it's forever going to necessarily be something you can't overcome. If you show a trend for upward progression with it, so to speak, you'll be okay. I hope that answers your question.
Are you taking verbal questions as well? I'm sorry, I didn't see the I didn't see the type box. I'll start with one. I was earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that for pilot resumes, or resumes in particular, it's more short and to the point. And I was curious about that because when you showed your sample resume, which was awesome because I've never seen one before, so that was super helpful. I went to another college before this that wasn't aviation, and they taught me how to do a resume, and I'm a little lost, but that was very helpful. But sidebar concluded. I noticed that you did include non-pilot work experience. And I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit further about when you shouldn't include work experience that has nothing to do with aviation, as basically everyone who's ever had a job before being a pilot can attest to.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the time frame for which you're in. So for example, if you were to get my resume, I probably would not even have space to include some of those jobs that I had in insurance and some of those other non-flying, non-aviation positions, right? But if you're still relatively new in the industry, there's variations here. I want enough information that it paints a picture to see what stuff you've done in your past that speaks to the position for which you're seeking today. For some people, it's only a 10-year history. 10-year employment history is usually kind of a rule of thumb for a resume. And that's flying and non-flying, even if you're going for a flying job. So I will have pilots that will have on their work all the way from when they were at the university and they were working at the bookstore, to working as an Uber driver, to working at a farm or a ranch as a ranch hand, to their first job where they were washing airplanes or towing planes. All of those things paint a picture, because as an interviewer, I see work ethic. I see somebody who is not afraid to do what it's going to take to get the job done. So I see consistency in employment history. I see a work ethic there. So usually 10 years is kind of a good rule of thumb for the resume, but some of you are going to have a much shorter history because you're still in school or you've just recently graduated. So maybe you just put, like, I just did a resume for a pilot. He just graduated in 2018. So we actually listed his date of graduation on his resume, 2018. And then we listed 3 jobs. He had a job in 2016, 17, 17, 18, and now he's got another job. So we listed all of those jobs on there, and 3 of them are not even flying. They are not, but it shows again that he's got a lot of skills. He's very adaptable. He's very flexible, and he's willing to do whatever it's going to take to get him to where he wants to go.
Okay, so you don't see sharing everything. Like, I guess I should have qualified. I'm 20, and by the time I graduate, I'll be 22. So I'll be looking for a flying job with a 10-year employment history being from when I was in 5th grade.
Yeah, no, you won't go back that far.
So it's like, and at this time, like, I have 5 jobs on my resume, none of which will, affect flying. So I was just kind of curious about where the line is, I suppose.
Yeah,
And, I think you made a good pitch about work ethic and stuff like that, but I just really wasn't sure, especially because flying is so specialized. It's like, if I'm going to say, oh, well, I worked at this job for 2 years and it's, totally unrelated. I was just kind of curious about how that fits in.
Yeah, and some of your jobs, were any of them customer service related?
All of them.
Oh, there you go. So that does relate to your job for flying. Because are you looking to go into commercial flying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Customer service, are you kidding me? That's kind of a big deal. And your ability to work with others, to work independently or to work in a group, to be able to take orders and follow directions and follow policies. Absolutely. Those past jobs help to paint that picture for your interviewers. So yeah, I'd put it on there.
Okay, great. And then one more question. As a college student, how do I put this? Our experience with letters of recommendation is usually pretty specialized,
Yeah.
usually for admissions or whatnot. I was curious about, you say collect letters of recommendation, but I mean, are they really, should they be specific? Or they probably shouldn't, because you don't want to be having to go back to your sources every 5 years when you want a new job. But I was wondering if you could describe that a little bit more, and if it's okay for them to be kind of dated in the point at which they were a letter at a certain point in your career or educational path.
Yeah. Absolutely. You can get them from professors if you happen to be like a teacher's aide or anything like that. That would be beneficial if you were part of any clubs or organizations. Then you can certainly get some letters reflecting of that. I had somebody, and he started he started an organization on his campus, and it was the first. He was the first to create this organization, and so he had worked with the dean of the college to get this going. So he got a letter of recommendation in which the dean made that, hey, this kid was on it and was organized and really wanted to push this through, and we did. And maybe it's just from those former jobs like we talked about that you've had, maybe former managers or even coworkers, and it can be more generic. I had the opportunity to work with Angie for approximately 9 months as we were bussing tables and working as servers at Applebee's. And during the time we were at Applebee's, she was very good with customer service, and she was very prompt and on time and very dependable. And she always came to work with a good attitude. It may be just that simple. As you start to move through your career, they will become a little bit more complex. But at least initially, talking about how the person knows you, for how long, your dependability, your attitude, being able to get the job done and having them depend on you, those are going to be some important traits for you to have on those letters of rec.
Great. Yeah, awesome.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. I just wasn't sure because often from my last experience really with letters of recommendation is for college admissions. And although, it's related, it's also a very different animal. And I wasn't particularly sure how specifically relevant your letter of recommendation has to be to your current job, or if it's okay if it was written 5 years ago in a different time when you're working, doing whatever, which that is perfectly fine. So I think that's
absolutely. Absolutely.
Joelle, I wanted to share just one quick piece of advice, especially working with professors and getting letters of rec. Sometimes it's helpful to draft your own letter of recommendation, as narcissistic as that sounds. To draft your own, very generic, you have your resume built in there, you have some things, your relationship is talked about in the letter, and then let them color that with their own language, but they can turn that around quicker. And I had professors who were, they were probably being asked to write letters of recommendation several times a month, especially certain times of the year. And if you need something sooner rather than later, drafting your own letter of rec for somebody to use as a template can be very helpful in getting it back. Just some advice I think everybody could use with, I've done it and it helps. And sometimes when people want letters of rec from me, I ask them if they can draft something, and then I'll finish it off. So
great. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's perfect,
Hi,
Troy. Yes.
I was wondering,
You'll even find that as you move through the industry, and people will ask you to write your own letters. Yeah.
All right, I think we had one more question.
yeah, I was wondering if Angie has time for one more question, or I don't know how much time we have left, but I had a question. So she mentioned, or Angie mentioned, that there are the issue of anomalies, and I think sometimes they're not necessarily a bad thing. Like Angie mentioned, they could do something that demonstrates maybe that you have character, that you're committed and dedicated. I've kind of heard a lot of conflicting advice about that from people. For example, I got into flight training probably, I mean, much later than, let's say, someone who's in their 20s. I'm in my mid 30s. And in very kind of unusual conditions. One of them is this pandemic that we have going on right now, which kind of messed things up for all of us, and certainly was quite the challenge trying to navigate it. So how can you use these anomalies to leverage it to your advantage, and speak about it openly while showing that you own it and that it demonstrates character? It's not necessarily such a terrible thing, because I've had people say things like, well, if you get into flight training later than usual and outside of your 20s, then that's going to be seen as something negative. And I know not everyone thinks that way, but I've heard that a lot. So how can we navigate that? I don't know if you have any advice about this. I would be very grateful.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the story I talked about with me getting into aviation. Is I didn't do it for a while. I was out of aviation for a while. So maybe I can demonstrate it. Let me kind of give you an example of how you can talk about it during an interview. Because again, one of the first questions they'll probably ask you is, tell us about yourself. Or they may just simply say, so you're a career changer. That's a common question. So you're a career changer. What got you started in aviation? And it could be as simple as, when I was a kid, my uncle was a military pilot, and then he was a GA pilot and always bought aircraft and fixed them up. And we lived on a farm, and he would literally fly in and we'd go barnstorming with him. And then he would always pick my brother and I up from the farm, and we'd get in the plane and fly. So the seed was planted early. But then when I was in high school, I got involved because we had the farm. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I got involved in gymnastics, got a gymnastics scholarship, and went to school to be a veterinarian. And when I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I needed to pay back bills. And so I got very invested in my my career in veterinary medicine at that time. I ran a veterinary hospital for several years. And it was during that time that one of our clients came in, and he actually was a pilot. And there was something about that. And I said, oh my gosh, it took me right back to that moment. And I said, I need to change, and I need to do something that I absolutely love. And so when COVID happened in 2020, I said, you know what, now's the time. There's a sign for me to make this change. And so I went and I got all of my flight ratings in under a year, and was immediately picked up by that flight school to be a flight instructor. And I haven't looked back. I don't know if that helps you or not.
Yes, that is very helpful, and thank you for answering that question.
Yeah, so it just because it's not that, it's not necessarily that path that everybody thinks. Not everybody's path is straight. And that's okay. It's not supposed to be. We are looking to see that you took, like I said, you have obstacles, but you turn them into opportunities. And that's exactly what you have done with that is that you had this obstacle. I didn't know how to get there, but this happened, and I made that decision. I became, and I did it. And look at where I'm at today. So you turn the obstacle into an opportunity. And that's a big deal at the interview.
Right on.
So,
all right. I know we are running a little over on time, but I think that's great because we're having great discussions. Does anybody have any final questions for Angie before we start closing things up? All right, awesome.
well, thank you. I'm sorry I rambled on, Dylan. Thank you.
Oh, you're good. I'm probably the most rambly person on here, so it was. I think we had really great discussions because of it, and we were able to cover a lot of different topics. So I do appreciate you spending your time with us. I know you guys have a lot of great material, and it was probably very hard to curate just a little slice of it for us. So I do appreciate that, and I think it's very helpful for everybody to, you get advice from all different areas, and it's helpful to get to see those similar themes of what people are telling you, the tried and true methods, as Troy was saying, like coming from someone who's in the industry as well. So I found it extremely valuable. So thanks.
Thank you very much for having me, and everybody. You got to hang in there. Keep it up, man. It's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Awesome. Well, hopefully, can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing now?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So this is the contact information for everybody that spoke today. Angie's email is down there at the bottom, as well as Danielle's, Jan's, and Karl's. So if you don't have those yet, I'll give you a moment to kind of get those written down, and then everyone's kind of free to head their different ways.
Thank you.
Bye, Angie. Thank you so much.